Welcome to a brand new episode of the Spiraling Podcast. I am your host, Jackson Wallace. I got quite a few participants with me today. We'll go all the way around the room. First, I got my co-host, ever so lovely co-host, Jason Holland with me. Jason, how are you, man?
I'm good.
Hey, you're live from D.C. How's it?
Yes, I am.
How's it hanging over there? Doing all right?
Yeah, just waiting on Trump to come out to give his interview.
Oh yeah, I'm waiting for January 20th. Going over to Evan Underwood. I had to sneak that one in there, Jason. You know I had to. Over on to we've had him on the show before. You guys remember him, the ever so lovely Evan Underwood. Evan, how are you, bud?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. If you would notice, guys, y'all are watching the YouTube portion of this. Evan came on this morning and he had his little overcoat, little pullover jacket thing going. Then I saw Jason put on his, and I was like, well, I have to be included in the club now. I got to go get mine and put it on. So Evan is a trendsetter. He's joining us here. Then we have the ever so lovely Chelsea Casciola. She's been on the show a couple times. You guys should remember her. Chelsea, how are you this morning?
Good. Excited to be here. Excited to talk about some things that are pretty prevalent going on right now. And
for sure.
Excited.
Yeah, I'm excited for everybody to be here too. So for those of you guys who don't know, we're going to be recording this a little bit before, but this is coming out in the brand new year, 2021, January. That's when the episode is scheduled to release. I guess I should just first of all go around the room before we kind of get going. Are you guys excited for 2021? Because I'm ready to leave 2020 behind personally.
Yes.
I know, but Kristen's going to be joining us here in a minute, so she just popped in here and she's getting set up. So.
Okay, awesome. We'll be very happy to have her on the show, guys. We have the whole the board, so I'll kind of do a little bit of explaining on what this podcast is. So, what we're doing here is something new that we're going to bring to 2021 for the Spiraling Podcast as a whole. We are doing a podcast panel. Right? So what we have here is we have every single member of the Spiraling Ministries board. Myself, Jason, Evan, Chelsea, Kristen. We're all here, and we're all going to try and talk about important topics of the day, important topics of each month, and go along forward. So we'll see if we continue this as this becomes a trend, but this is our very first one, so we're pretty excited. Today, we're going to be talking about, obviously, the big topic of 2020, COVID, right? COVID-19 and the impacts, specifically the impacts it has had on mental health. We here at Spiraling Ministries really do care about everyone's mental health and how we can address that and try and make things better for everybody involved. And of course, COVID just had so many effects throughout the entire year. I mean, we can't start off the new year without talking about the most important thing that just happened. So we're going to kind of get on into it. So I guess my first kind of general question before we get into like our main topics of discussion is, I mean, what a year that was with COVID. I mean, what did you think about it all? Maybe I can start with you, Evan. What did you think about COVID and the year that it brought us in 2020?
Oh man,
I know that's a very loaded question.
Yeah, it is. January this time, January 2020. I don't think anybody saw what was going to happen.
Yeah.
Obviously there's a little bit of talking about COVID, probably January, February, and like I was just totally skeptical about the whole situation. Like I just thought it was another, swine flu, bird flu type situation where it was just going to fizzle out and go away. And, obviously it's grown into this huge thing. So it's going to change our lives, I think, for the foreseeable future. And, it's here to stay, unfortunately.
I think so. Yeah. Here to stay. It's the world definitely changed. Especially for us here in the United States and in February and March of last year. But we're making steps towards remediating that, if you will, and trying to do as best we can to cope with it and run with it. Chelsea, did you have any impacts from COVID this year?
Yeah, I mean, it was a strange year for me, and I think honestly, I when we get in this time frame, so we're recording this towards the end of December,
Right.
to be able to go through the editing process and whatnot to have it released by January of next year. But you know, at this time, I start reflecting on the year and kind of what God taught me throughout the year
Mm-hmm.
and what life lessons God you know this year was just as strange as it was. I'm an essential worker, so I really, there was no I was very, very, very blessed, that I didn't go through a layoff, and I really didn't have much um, impact in like my work day to day life. Really, the biggest impact for me was my son started kindergarten this year.
Yeah.
And so the first, couple of weeks or, 6 weeks, really, he was doing virtual. So because I was an essential worker, or I am, uh, I would sit with him at his allotted time in front of his computer and work with him, make sure he was paying attention. And then, was having to go back and forth between that and work. And, it was during hurricane season. So for me in my line of work, like
Yeah.
that's a really busy time. I believe at one point we were actually going through a storm event when we were out of town. While he was doing school virtually, and it was really frustrating because there was a point in time where they would have their allotted amount of time that they were on the screen with their teachers,
Mm-hmm.
but then they had all this like extra work they had to do for like their homeroom and then out classes, and it had to be submitted into a program. And I'm a single mom, so it
Right.
was working 60 hours a week. On top of that, by the time we got home and whatever, the last thing I wanted to do was sit down and make him do all these school assignments. And so I told his teacher, I'm sorry, these are they're not going to all get done. I'm really sorry.
Yeah.
But, so that was the biggest frustration that I experienced with it. And when he finally did get to go back face to face, obviously there's all kinds of hoops and precautions and things like that you've got to be accommodating to. But and it was very frustrating. Like there were a lot of times that I was overly stressed out, or just, so I would say that was kind of the greatest impact directly that I felt
Sure.
throughout this year. It's COVID but it worked out. He's back in face to face. We haven't had any issues with it.
That's good. I'm
Uh,
glad.
just following the precautions and, so.
For sure. Yeah, it was a crazy year, right? Like, and just to start even thinking about just kind of one little section of COVID and its implications, like the kids, right? And school and being out of school and going back and the challenges you had faced with that, the challenges for in-home learning, and God, the teachers, man, bless the teachers for real, seriously, because I could not imagine having to teach so many kids over virtually, who have, maybe some of them haven't used this technology before, maybe some of them have, some of them are not of course familiar with the uploading of the program, so you got to get the parents involved, and they're worried about rent and everything else going on in the world. Like, it's absolutely insane. Like I there's no way I could even dream of doing something like that. Like, that's seriously, so props to the teachers. But Jason, I guess we'll kind of start off on our main topics with you, man. You coming back at us from DC. I'm glad you're here. So here we go. We had our buddy Darren write up a couple things for us, just kind of give us a guide to the podcast panel. Our first one is when COVID first hit, and we'll start with you, Jason. What were your immediate concerns?
Some of my immediate concerns were to make sure that I was taken care of, in the sense of being around people, making sure that people that I was around were being safe and precautious.
Mm-hmm.
Because when COVID first started, um, the way they treated it was different than the way they treat it now,
Right.
and they didn't really know what they were dealing with. Um, so I'm coming off of being treated for colon cancer, so my immune system's still compromised. So that was a big concern for me, was being around everybody and being out in public, and my worry of catching it and uh, not being able to treat it correctly.
Of course, yeah. Especially with I got a brother that's immunocompromised as well, and so we have to be very very careful. I mean, even now, right? So me and him live together up in Austin, and we're super careful and sanitizing as many things as possible, and trying to make sure that if we're going places other than work and stuff, it's very limited. Just because if he catches it, it would be really really bad for him. So we're still living with it now, and I think, like Evan said, we're going to live through with it for quite a while. I think it's kind of here to stay. Just kind of be one of those new things. That's just the way it goes. Kristen, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, well, hello. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am great. I kind of wanted to backpedal off of what Jason was saying, and I'm curious to hear your perspective because, like I just mentioned, I have an immunocompromised brother. Same thing kind of with my mother. What were your immediate concerns when COVID first hit? Especially, I imagine, being wife of a man who is immunocompromised.
Yeah, it was very nerve-wracking, and we weren't sure what to do at that time and what precautions needed to be taken because everything was so new.
Yeah.
So it was really trying to limiting who was coming in and out of the house, and we also had the kids that were sent home from school. So it was a difficult few weeks until we kind of gathered what exactly needed to be done.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Everybody's just, especially at the beginning, everybody's just kind of like, "Whoa, what is this? This is different," and it hasn't happened, especially in our lifetime. So, definitely kind of came out of left field. We'll move on to our next one, and Evan, I'd like to start with you with this question. It's what type of mental health conditions are more susceptible to COVID concerns? What do you think about that?
Oh man!
Again, I'm hitting you with all the loaded questions, Evan.
Yeah, that's getting with the hard hitters.
Just for you, man. Just for you.
I would say, obviously, as a blanket statement, I would say all of them. But I think the most susceptible in my opinion, would be probably depression.
Yeah.
Just because of everything that's going on, people that aren't being allowed to, interact with others. You're stuck at home in quarantine. You're kind of left to your own devices. I think that's, to me, and that's a biggie.
It's definitely a biggie. Chelsea, you want to take a stab at it?
Yeah. So I think for me, so a lot of y'all that have kind of been with us since the beginning know that, my background in the mental health field is I actually worked in the mental health field for about 6 years, primarily as a director. But so I keep up with my clients, over the years. And one of the things that I've kind of noticed a trend of is, those that suffer from addiction and substance abuse, the relapse rate has gone way up this year. And, you're kind of, there's a saying, the idle mind is the devil's playground, and you think about it in terms of you're kind of locked up in your house, apartment, not really able to fellowship, which is a huge key component of recovery. Yeah. Being around others, and that's what you're trained to do. When you want to go to a meeting and socialize and talk about it, and so you kind of have to get creative, and it really kind of depends on how early on in your recovery you are, what's going on in that aspect. To be able to even pick up the phone and know, okay, I can't see someone or go to a meeting right now, but I can utilize these other tools in my toolbox. So that's kind of been my biggest concern, this year, is just kind of watching some of my older clients and friends, go back out, just because you're literally sitting there in your thoughts.
Yeah.
That's really for an addict, but also, across the board for mental illness. You think about it in terms of people are less likely to go to the doctor to get on medication or to be able to even identify, a diagnosis, or go to a doctor to get a diagnosis. So, I mean, there's a lot of components that go into that. As far as what I've seen directly, just based off of what my past, career was, being able to stay in touch with those clients, I've seen a lot of that. And it's been really heartbreaking, because for addicts to go back out and relapse, you don't know if you have another high in you. And that's kind of something that you're taught early on, so you never know when it's going to be the last time, basically. And so if you're sitting in your thoughts and left to your own devices at that point, it's a very, very dangerous place to be.
For sure, yeah. I think that's a very good point, especially when we're not even just talking about, the average person being at home. I mean, obviously we are. Them just being at home, like Evan said, in quarantine, you're isolated. You're not able to see as many family members, right? And that's been a big topic as we've been moving through the holidays, as we're recording this, of course, has been like, hey, you have to keep in mind, you have to be safe, right? Especially with these holiday seasons. I know everybody wants to see their family. Of course, it's been a rough year. We've been dealing with this all the way since February. Like the thing that we want most is just to go and hug everybody and just say, oh my gosh, like this has been insane. Like, well, we have Christmas, we have holidays, but we have to be mindful and self-aware and understand that, we could potentially unwillingly infect one of our family members. And so that's just something we have to take into consideration to make sure we're taking proper precautions for all of that. But like you said, just people that are not able to go or weren't able to go, especially in the beginning, to the meetings, right? Less likely to go to the doctor. I mean, it's impacted every part of everyday life. And so just thinking about how one would deal with that is just kind of mind-boggling. Anyway,
can I
please
let me touch on something real quick with the whole being in isolation and not being able to associate with other people. I will tell you guys, I have learned this whole Zoom that we're doing now and FaceTime. When my son was on isolation, because he had COVID over the summer, he got it from camp. We kept him in his room, and it wasn't to be mean to him. It was, I couldn't get sick, and I there was nowhere for me to go other than a hotel, and I was not about to go stay in a hotel for 2 weeks by myself. But he had to stay in his room, but he used FaceTime all the time. He was associating with his friends. Mm-hmm. A lot of his friends from school, they have iPads. So he stayed connected, and I think that's what really helped his well-being, because, all of us can attest when we were kids, we didn't have that kind of technology. So if we had COVID when we were kids and we had to be in isolation like that, it would have been much, much harder than the kids that have the technology now. So technology has been a good thing. And even for myself, if I can't do a face-to-face meeting with somebody, I'll do it over Zoom. And it still allows me to be able to see that person, allows me to talk to that person. And it's a little bit of a sense of normalcy in a meeting. You get used to it. And I think this is going to be our new norm going forward in society. People are going to utilize Zoom more. People are going to utilize the technology that we have, that we've become accustomed to over the last year.
Yeah, I think that's a very excellent point. I mean, Zoom has been, pretty much a godsend, right? It's been excellent, especially, for us in our line of work and for many others out there. Just be able to jump in a Zoom call, do your normal meetings, get through your stuff throughout the day. And, I've noticed personally, more and more companies, and of course I don't think all of them are going to do this, but more and more have been thinking about and making the steps towards just working from home. I know personally my brother's company, a company that he works for, and they've moved completely to working just from home. And so he's actually considering just coming back and moving to Texas. He lived in California, but since he didn't have to go to the office anymore, his boss is like, well, as long as you can work from home and work remotely, I don't care. So I mean, as long as you get your stuff done. So I think more and more places are going to try and analyze, like, do we really need this office space? You know what I mean? It's just, of course it doesn't work for everyone, but it is a question, and it is one that a lot of companies out there are like, you know what? If we could be as productive as we were before, why not? Why not save on the rent? So there's definitely been some good things that have come out of it, like just being able to utilize Zoom, and I'm very, very glad that the kids have been able to utilize their technology to stay in touch, because that's very important at a young age. With socializing is super important. Moving on though, and I would love to get to go back to you, Jason. Does it surprise you that calls to hotlines for mental health suicide prevention had a steep rise since the lockdowns?
Not at all.
Okay.
That's expected. Whenever you have somebody you have a society that is used to dining out, going and sitting in restaurants and eating. The amount of um, social practices that we had before, of just some of the small things, going to a ball game, going to a bar and hanging out, and you cut that off from society. You're going to have people that are going to go stir crazy in their home, and they're going to start suffering through mental health issues, depression. I think depression is the biggest thing that people are going through right now. It's because a lot of people just can't deal with the isolation, and it takes a certain kind of person to be able to stay in the home 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, we all of us here, we work for the same company, but we're able to go into the office a couple of days a week. Most of the time, we do work from home quite a bit still, but we're able to socialize with each other. There's a lot of people out there that don't even have that. They don't have a job. They
Yeah.
don't have friends that they can go to. They've been laid off of their job. um, on top of being laid off from your job, you can't find another job. You have the stress of now your benefits are about to expire. Well, what do I do from there? I can only imagine what people are going through right now.
Yeah, and for sure, absolutely. Kristen, would you like to expand on that any at all?
Well, I just know from a little bit of personal experience, my mom lost her job at the beginning of the pandemic, and it's been very difficult for her to find employment, and um, her unemployment benefits have already run out.
Yeah.
So she's really struggling.
For sure. And actually, this is, of course, this is not on our questions list, but just a question that I personally have. This is for Jason and for Kristen. As small business owners, what, and I this again, loaded question, but
Yeah.
as small business owners, what has been your reaction and your kind of strategy into dealing with COVID and the challenges that they present towards, like you guys said, towards people being able to come into the office, towards the type of work that that we do. What have been kind of some of the strategies that you've deployed to help yourself and the businesses that you run?
You can go.
Okay. Um, when all of this first started, we we moved the office to the house, and we were working from home most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And Chelsea and Evan were coming over, and the guys would come in and out, and we just started to realize that what we're doing here at the house is not as safe as having an office building that we can go to and work from, because everybody's coming into our home, and we're trying to keep me safe, but
Mm-hmm.
yet there's traffic in and out all day long. So we move back to the office, but if somebody is suspected that they have a COVID, um, we shut everything down and everybody goes home and works. We don't play around with that. So if somebody was exposed and somebody finds out or somebody has it, um, everything gets shut down and we go home and we work and we utilize Zoom. And I think everybody's become accustomed to doing that. And I think, even now I take advantage of it a lot. I enjoy going to the office. I enjoy getting out of the house. But on the other hand, I have built my home office at the house um, to where I enjoy working out of it. So I do come to the office, average about 2 or 3 times a week.
Yeah.
But I have an office phone here at the house, and if anybody needs me, they dial my extension just like I'm at the office. I answer the phone and we talk. The only thing that we do a little bit differently is we utilize FaceTime for our face-to-face encounters, where we are on the phone with each other all the time. Uh, and even in the office, we're not sitting in. Some of us are in cubicles next to each other, but some of us are in separate offices, and we pick up the phone there and call each other. So me work from the house is just like me working down the hallway at the office.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Very good. Chelsea, I was actually kind of get your thoughts. I know you have your background with mental health and the work that you've done there. Kind of backpedaling again to our question that we had before. Are you surprised that calls to the hotlines for mental health for suicide prevention has gone up so drastically?
I mean, not at all.
Yeah.
I think you kind of put people in a position that are already struggling. One of the things, whether it be depression or, there's a part in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous where Bill Wilson, who is the person that founded or co-founded Alcoholics Anonymous, he wrote during the 1929 Great Depression when the stock market crashed, how people were jumping out of buildings, to their death. And he said, that's silly. I'm going to go to the bar and drink. And how I internalized that was, instead of committing suicide and just ending it abruptly, I'm going to go drink and kill myself slowly because I'm an alcoholic.
Yeah.
So in my mind, that's kind of what I resonate with when we're talking about this topic, because you leave people to their own devices for too long, and it's just, you're taught when you're going through the suicidal ideations, the thoughts that your mind with a mental illness and chemical imbalance is going to run with. You're taught these things, whether you've been in therapy, whether you've been working, with a counselor at a treatment center, whatever component you're utilizing as far as like a outside source.
Yeah.
You're taught what to do when these things come up, whether it be, call a friend, get outside of yourself and go have coffee, or, go spend time volunteering. And it's like, yeah, that's great. But then now you add this component of completely shut down, and you can't do those things. So you're basically just left with you and your thoughts, and that's a really scary place to be for anybody that's dealing with any kind of mental illness,
Yeah.
especially, like Jason said, depression, and even addicts and alcoholics. That comes with the territory of, I don't want to get high, but I also don't want to feel like this, so I'm just going to end it now. And I've had clients do that, and it's and I've had good friends that have done that even outside of the pandemic. So I can only imagine, the exacerbated scale that this has put everything on for those that are struggling with that. And I think that we've adapted to what 2020 has brought as far as utilizing resources that are outside of the box per se. Like Jason said, in the business side of things, there's definitely on the mental health side of things, they've tried to be accommodating and offered free therapy via Zoom and things like that. So I think it's just harder to be more motivated. At least for me, like, I'm more like, if I know I have to be at my therapist's office at 3 p.m. on Tuesday, I'm more likely to go to that versus if I'm just sitting at home knowing I have a Zoom call, it's really easy for me to be like, yeah, I'm not going to get on. And let that depression kind of snowball and take over. So it's it's really broken my heart, to watch everything unravel on the mental health side this year and knowing what places people have to be in going through the lockdown. Like Jason said, I've been extremely fortunate in working for the company that I do. Outside of work, Kristen's my best friend. So I get to, sit there and socialize and fellowship with her, and we talk about Christ and Bible studies and do things that are going to be spiritual and emotional and mental encouragement face to face. And I know that's not the experience for a lot of people. So again, I've been very blessed, very fortunate this year to still have that component in my life and dealing with my own mental illness as far as being a recovering addict. So
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I think this next question I have for you, Jason, is, as a society, I think this is a fair question. Should we be asking ourselves, what is the greater risk? Is mental health the greater risk, or is COVID the greater risk? What do you think?
I think that's a very complicated question
For sure.
because when you're dealing with the kids, um, you hear you know the president and other leaders talking about the risk of not being in school and it affecting the developmental aspect of a child's life, being able to socialize, being able to learn in a one-on-one setting with a teacher, and you put them in a house all day where they're on a computer trying to learn. Well, I don't. Well, when I was that age, I didn't learn on a computer. I learned being face to face in school, being able to socialize with my friends, and that allowed me to grow as a person. Well, if you put a kid on isolation, they don't have their friends at school. Now they do have the technology that they used to, we didn't used to with
Mm-hmm.
FaceTime and things like that. So they're, my son, he's been able to socialize with his friends when they're on isolation. They play video games together. They'll sit there and FaceTime each other, and then get on the computer and play a video game.
Mm-hmm.
So they're talking to each other. So I know most kids aren't that fortunate to have an iPad, a computer, and all the devices that my son has to be able to keep in touch with his friends. um, so I that's why I was saying that the question's kind of a complicated question because
Right.
I do have some employees that their kids don't have an iPad, and when they're on isolation, they just sit there and play video games by themselves. Um, that's nowhere near the kind of social life a kid should have. So being around their friends, being in school, that's where they need to be. So shutting down schools, the risk of the COVID in schools is very low, and the association with COVID in kids are very resilient. They're bouncing back fast, and there have been very few deaths from kids with COVID. The numbers are staggering. It's a very small amount. So why shut down the schools and risk long-term effects of a kid's developmental aspect because they're scared of the kids getting COVID? I think that's wrong. But on the other hand, when you go into a nursing home, I think nursing homes should be locked down. No one should be coming in and out of nursing homes because the risk for people in nursing homes is much higher. the death rate for an elderly person is much higher than it is for a kid. So you gotta,
Right.
as we've learned with the virus, a lot of our leaders are taking the the steps that are based off of science. Elderly people, they still have the most restrictions on nursing homes. Here in Texas, our kids are going back to school. My son's school, we've only had 3 or 4 cases, but at his school, they're in pods. They have like yellow group, red group, green group, and they only associate with the kids in that pod. So if somebody gets
Interesting.
sick, it's isolated to that group. And then in class, they have the plexiglass in front of them. They're wearing masks. They're socially distancing. I think the kids are a lot smarter than the adults when it comes to coronavirus, and they're handling it a lot better.
Yeah, for sure. And again, it's a super loaded question. But Evan, I guess going over to you, man. What do you think that it's a I was saying, do you think that it's a question that should even be asked? Like, is it? No, I know it's when we start diving into it, like Jason said, it's a very loaded question. It's one that takes a lot of analysis, and it's kind of a pick your poison, so to speak. But do you think that it's one that we should start asking ourselves?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, both mental health and COVID are both, very dangerous things, and they can both have different outcomes, but kind of kind of the way I see it is mental health is way more dangerous than COVID is,
Okay.
because whatever your mental health status is, that's not going to cause you to get COVID, right? But if you come down with COVID or the coronavirus, or whatever you want to call it, that could definitely have an impact on your mental health. The other way around. So um, that's something that just everybody, I think, needs to work on their self care, and make sure that they're in a good headspace. And Jason, kind of touching on what you said about the nursing homes and stuff, I've got a little bit of personal experience with that. My grandmother's in a nursing home in Oregon, and they've been locked down since March. My mom, there's no visitors. They can go up to the window outside and like wave through the window, and do that kind of stuff. And that's been kind of what their norm is now.
Yeah.
They're not letting visitors in from the outside. Um, schools are a little bit looser. My daughter's in-person school. In our school district, you have the choice to do, at home learning or in school. And me and my wife both work, and she was going to daycare before that. So we're like, okay, she's going to in-person school. Um,
Yeah.
and we've gotten a couple notifications that there's been a case, at her school, and they'll send out an email and say, okay, if your child was in direct contact with this person, you'll be followed up with, more extensively. And we've never had that. So she's never came in contact with anybody at her school that's, came down with it or anything. But, they're taking a lot of precautions. Like Jason said, with the plexiglass, and they have to wear a mask all day. And that's a lot for a kindergartner, probably, to comprehend, like, why do I have to wear this all day? Why is there a plexiglass thing between me and my schoolmates? Um,
Right.
but yeah, I mean, I think just, yeah, they're both dangerous, but I think that mental health is definitely probably the one that we need to be concerned about, because it's not going away. Mental health is never going to go away. COVID, fingers crossed, they came up with a vaccine, and it's going to, be controlled, and
Yeah.
and hopefully eventually be eradicated. So, but mental health is, unfortunately, it's here to stay. Um, so
I see. Yeah, I understand. Yeah, it's definitely a complicated question, but one that seems that we should at least be considering asking ourselves. But something else is another surprising statistic is that calls to protective services are way down. Is that because kids are not out in public, where people can see signs of abuse, or is that maybe a sign of something else? Chelsea, I'm hoping maybe you could shed some light on that.
Who, me?
Yes, Chelsea.
Okay. Actually, Kristen and I were talking about this the other night.
Mm-hmm.
And I think both of us were pretty emotional, being moms. Um, and, it was definitely an emotional conversation, but I think absolutely, you think about who makes those calls to CPS, a lot of the times, whether it be coaches or teachers or significant, elders in that child's life that see them on a regular basis, enough to know when their well-being is being compromised. And you talk about doing virtual learning and not being able to do sports and not being able to do extracurricular activities and all of those things, you're limiting who's in their life able to recognize those things. So I definitely think it makes sense that those phone calls have gone down, but I definitely unfortunately don't believe it's for a positive reason. I just think that their world has shrunk significantly as far as people that are able to identify their well-being, and as a mother, that breaks my heart.
Yeah.
So I've talked about it before, but I'm a huge baseball fan, and my son thankfully was given the baseball bug by God, and obviously super thrilled about it. But I actually coach his team every season, um, and not being able to have seasons because of this, it puts things in a perspective. Now, I'm not saying that I've ever had to be in the position to call CPS as a coach, but I know that that's primarily it's the adults that see them on a regular basis. So not being able to have that component and that outlet to, and it's so important for kids that are in a situation for CPS to even be called, to have those outlets. You think about kids that are growing up in an abusive home, they look forward to baseball practice. They look forward to going to school. They look forward to, anything and everything that puts them in a position not to be at home. And that's what's so heartbreaking is now not only are they not able to do those things that helps with their mental well-being, but now they're put in a situation 100% of the time where the physical, emotional, and mental component is all being compromised with no recognition. And so, like I said, Kristen and I actually were talking about this specifically the other night. And again, it gets emotional, like as a parent, because obviously, like I love my son, he's my world, but I've worked with kids my entire life. I serve at my church with infants. I coach baseball. So I've always been interactive with kids, and to know that they're not getting the outlets they need to get help if that's what's needed, and B, to have an escape from that. When you think about it in a bigger picture, it's just it's very heartbreaking. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very very tough. And Kristen, I'd like to go to you too, because I know Chelsea just said that she mentioned you guys had that conversation. What do you think? I mean, it's I know that it's a surprising statistic that the numbers the calls to child protective services have gone way down. I mean, do you think that can be is any part of that statistic good, or is it a sign that more bad things are at hand?
No, I definitely think it's a negative.
Okay.
Not only are there not enough people in the children's life to report these incidents, you also got to think about the parents that are out the house. As a mom, you hate to say it, but you're locked in a house with your kids and you're going to go a little bit crazy, so that not only are the children at danger, for these mental or physical abuses because they're around their parents more and not around coaches, teachers, pastors as much.
Yeah.
That's obviously affecting the parents' mental well-being even more. So I definitely think, yeah, it's worse than it probably looks, which is sad. But it's something that I think everybody needs to keep an extra eye open and be aware for others and just check in on people.
Yeah, checking on your friends, checking on your loved ones. Utilize FaceTime and Zoom, and have a little get together. Or virtually. It's always fun. Me and my family do that from time to time too. We'll just all sit in there and have a little Zoom call, and you know play games or whatever. So it's always fun time.
Let me add on to something. So one of our more popular guests that we've had on is Sonny, and as you guys know, Sonny is an ex-police officer, and Sonny and we tried to have the first podcast on like 3 or 4 different occasions, but him and we were such good friends that we just started talking and lost track of time and said, "Oh crap, we forgot about the podcast." So we just sat there and talked. And he was telling me that, and this was back in July, I think, that the statistics for child abuse, not only child abuse, but sexual child abuse has gone up tremendously. And there's nobody that's in that child's life that's able to determine that they're being sexually abused, because we are on isolation. Hopefully, going back to school now, all that is being taken care of. But he said that there was, I don't remember the percentage, but the percentage was staggering. It was a huge amount of child sexual abuse cases that are going unnoticed.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely something to keep in mind and keep an eye out for. Be sure you check in on your friends and family. Jason, I'm going to pass it right back to you as you kind of changed up from Washington, D.C., hit the quick flight. You're down at the beach. For those of you guys that are listening right now.
I'm in Hawaii now.
Jason's hanging out in Hawaii on the Zoom call. Nice waves on him in the background, the sun shining on his face. Jason, my next question is for you, or at least we're going to start with you, is are those with addiction issues or those in recovery more likely to have a problem due to COVID concerns?
Yes, absolutely. The statistics that we have been able to pull from the CDC, before COVID, 1 in 4 adults had a mental health or addiction issue. And the statistics now is every 1 in 2 adults has a mental health or addiction issue.
Wow.
So those are the stats from the CDC. 1 in 2 adults are suffering either from a mental health issue or an addiction issue. And the spike in alcohol sales that we've seen is mind-blowing as well. And I don't have those numbers in front of me, but
Right.
People are abusing alcohol at a higher rate than ever before. And I think as a society, once this COVID is over with and we're able to go back to a more normal sense of society, I think we're going to have a lot more issues on our hands than we think we are, because we're going to be under a whole nother pandemic of mental health and addiction.
Yeah, definitely something staggering to concern with. Chelsea, I'm gonna go ahead and pass you the ball here. Just kind of backing up on what Jason said. Do you think that, or those with addiction issues and those in recovery, they're more likely to have problems with COVID?
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of talked about this earlier on the mental health side of things. I definitely think that people are more susceptible. It's kind of like a microscope. If you're, you have this routine, you go to work, you have sporting events, you're working with kids on homework. You don't really have time to divert from that routine. But you're left to your own devices by being locked up and at home. You're working from home, you're teaching your kids from home, you're dealing with all of these components right in front of you. I think you're more susceptible to just not want an escape.
Right.
You're not busy enough, even working from home, you may be busy, but you're not busy enough to where you're coming from the office. It's not the same dynamic. And so I think one of the special things about people that are already in recovery, not people that are identifying throughout this year that they have a problem. I think one of the beautiful things is accountability factor. And I think we as people in recovery need to be better about the accountability factor. I think we live in a society where people are scared to say things sometimes out of fear of offending someone, as long as if it's in opposition of what the norm, is. And so I think, if there's times that I'm off, just in my mood, Kristen's one of the first people to call me out on it. And it's never I take offense to it or get defensive. It's, this is someone that loves and cares about me, knows me really well, and is identifying off with me. And it could just be an off day, but the piece that the point that I make in that is all it takes is picking up the phone. I think I've used my phone more in 2020 than I ever have in, a lifetime. And again, a huge part of pushing through it is we need to be about the accountability factor. I used to be worried, to call my friends out on things or tell them I didn't agree with them or tell them that I noticed something that maybe they weren't aware of. But when you look at it in the standpoint of like their life depends on it, then I don't really have, it's a tough love mentality of I'd rather say this and make you upset for a little bit than not say anything and then,
something bad happen. Yeah.
Right. And so at the end of the day, it's, again, the way that I always kind of look at it is their life depends on it just as much as mine does. I keep, the friendships that I have in my life today, I love the scripture of iron sharpens iron. And it's a principle that's used in the program as well, but it's something that I've really come to appreciate and really hold close to my heart. And the friendships that I do have, they encourage me in Christ. They encourage me in my recovery. On my 10-year sobriety birthday, Kristen, surprised me and had my entire office decorated and Astros things. And it's a little pieces of encouragement, but at the same time, I know just as much as there's those victories, there's the bumps and bruises along the way that Absolutely. I know anytime I have that accountability in my life to utilize. So I think we're definitely, and I say we as, as far as my people, of being in recovery, but also those that are slowly identifying, from this year that they've got a substance abuse problem. I definitely think that we need to be about not being so scared to offend one another, and look at it from the standpoint of, I love this person and their life depends on me telling them that what's happening isn't okay. Whether you start seeing someone start drinking every single day or being drunk or intoxicated or high every day, those things aren't normal. And I know that being locked up in your house and not really having an escape elsewhere, that's kind of become the normal this year. I can't tell you how many times I've seen on Facebook, like memes and little things here and there about, jokes about becoming an alcoholic this year. And it, while I can appreciate a good joke about my people, we have to look at it and be better about realizing like, no, this isn't the normal. And what happens when the pandemic does start to dissipate, you've already created a habit at this point. So I think that it's been a hard year to watch from the outside looking in. I'm very fortunate and grateful that I myself didn't deal with too much as far as thoughts or triggers and things like that. but it's definitely kind of been a glass case that I've been on the outside looking in through social media, primarily, of former clients, friends that have
Yeah.
really and truly suffered um, greatly on this end. So.
Yeah. Hey, Evan, I'm curious. Have you personally seen somebody struggle greatly with COVID or with COVID concerns? Like, it could be directly with the virus, or it could be mental health, as we've talked about before. It could be struggles with getting their kid back to school, whatever it is. Like, in the great umbrella of COVID, have you ever personally seen someone struggle with some of that stuff?
All of the above.
All of the above. Okay.
Yeah. So pretty early on, it was like in March, my stepdad actually uh, got COVID.
Okay.
And so him and my mom they were quarantined in their house for 2 weeks and not allowed to leave. And he had some other health issues that popped up. He got shingles, and it got like
Oh my
in his
gosh.
eye, so his vision was all impaired. Well, so because he had had COVID, even after he got the positive test back, or the all clear, he couldn't find a doctor to see him for his eye.
Oh my
So it was
gosh.
a huge health concern. And I think mentally, my stepdad did okay mentally, but my mom, she struggled a lot. And she works from home. She owns a small business, and she works from home, but she was at home with my stepdad for 2 weeks.
Right.
And I think that, that definitely changed things. And me and my wife, I'm an only child. So me and my wife, we're down here in Texas. My parents are in Oregon. We kind of felt a little helpless as well, because like, what can we do? So we started like ordering food to be delivered to them from restaurants in town, and we got some people from church that we used to go to, kind of helped in and started doing like a meal train and all that. So
Very cool.
that was kind of a little thing that we did that we thought we could help out with.
Yeah.
But you think about COVID, and then you've got your quarantine, but even after that 2 weeks is up, or 10 days, or however long it is now, there's a lot of lasting effects that come from that. My stepdad, it's December, he's still dealing with vision issues and stuff
Oh
from
wow. Gosh.
the back in March, and they don't know if that's going to continue or not. But so it's not just people are struggling, and it's not just for this 2 weeks that the virus runs its course. There's lasting effects. So I think we have to take that into account as well. That at the end of 14 days, it's not just over.
Yeah.
There's stuff that can continue on for months, or who knows how long.
Yeah. It's definitely some lasting effects of going through the virus, and also, like you said, other mental, and then of course health concerns that come from that too. So definitely something to keep in mind. Jason, my friend, have you personally seen someone struggle with some COVID concerns?
I've noticed with my son. My son had COVID over the summer. Like I said, he got it from camp, and
Mm-hmm.
I think he's got some lasting side effects where he's got some really bad headaches.
Man.
He feels tired quite a bit. So he hasn't fully recovered. Even though during his COVID, the only reason we knew he had COVID was he had a sore throat. That was his only symptom, was a sore throat.
Wow.
And at first we were just like, it's probably strep throat. And then Kristen's like, well, we need to go get him tested.
Yeah.
And I was actually against getting him tested at first, but then I was like, yeah, just go get him tested and see what happens. And sure enough, he was positive. But the lasting effects of COVID, he seems to be doing pretty good, and everybody that I've talked to seems to be doing pretty good on on the aspect of not being around people. Um, just his long term effects now is headaches and fatigue.
And
Yeah.
it has caused him to develop migraines, which he's never had before.
Oh goodness.
And he does still have some issues with taste.
Yeah. Wow. We'll just continue going around the room. Chelsea, you had some personal anyone that deal with
Yeah.
that
So
stuff?
I was kind of sitting here like reflecting and, kind of getting emotional because it's, my very first, well, not my first therapist, but the therapist that was probably the most significant in my adolescent life, from the time I was 15, going through parents' separation and then divorce, to suicide attempts and being put in the first treatment center to then going into drug rehab. She actually passed away this year from COVID.
Oh
And,
gosh, I'm sorry.
it, it's just, it's wild, I remember when Kristen called me to tell me that their son was positive, and her and I just both kind of sat on the phone crying, not really knowing what that meant and how greatly it was going to impact, her family. And what's funny is at the time that he was tested positive, I was working from their house. So I was exposed at that point. Well, during that week, my son was actually in Dallas with his dad. And so when they found out their son was positive, they paid for everyone to go get tested that had been around him. And I was grateful for that, but we all were negative, Jason, Kristen, and I, everyone that had been around their son tested negative. But as a precautionary, I called my son's dad and just said, look, I was exposed. I really don't want to put my son in harm's way of potentially, if it was for whatever, false negative, whatever. I just want to be safe. And so he ended up staying in Dallas for another 2 weeks, and that killed me because I hadn't ever been away from my son for that long. And that was really hard. And coming, on the mental health side, that's my little person. And so not being able to be around him, and, on top of that, being isolated and quarantined for 2 weeks, not able, I mean, I would go over to the, Jason and Kristen's house, and Kristen and I would just kind of do one of these numbers on the window so that I could at least see her for a minute. And, it's been a really hard year.
It's been rough. Yeah.
On the COVID side and on the mental health side, looking back, the people that I've known that have gotten it, the people that I've known that have passed away from it, and people that I know that have taken their own lives and dealt with, relapse in their addiction and things like that. It's just, you look at the numbers of direct people that and you times that by, hundreds of what really is on the scale. And it's really sad to think about, and I look at it from the standpoint of the whole reason that I'm a part of this foundation, and that's to help people. And when you're dealing with a pandemic like this, you start to feel a little helpless. And I just hope that going into 2021 that we can be better as a country, and as breaking the stigma and really understanding what mental health truly is, and mental illness, but also, that the foundation can push and strive to start being helpful. And that's my hope and my prayer for this year.
For sure. Yeah. First, I just want to thank everybody for coming on and sharing your thoughts and your concerns and your stories with everybody on the podcast, to all of our listeners. And I know it's been kind of a little bit of a Debbie Downer on the podcast, right? It's been a sensitive topic, but to kind of end on an uplifting note, I'm curious. I'm going to go around the room. Evan, I'll start with you. What are some things that we can do? And again, loaded question, because you seem to be my favorite person when I ask the loaded questions too, man. But what can we do to help? Like, and again, this covers everything. People that struggle with mental health, right? People that are worried about, with COVID in general. Like, what are some steps that they could take to take precautions, or steps that they could take to cope with depression and cope with isolation? What are some things that we can do to help that, or some things that people can do to help themselves?
Oh man.
Save the best one for last.
Yeah, yeah. I think, I think that obviously one of the best things that we can do is take the precautions, wear the mask, use hand sanitizer, wash your hands, limit. We've all gotten a little relaxed, I think,
Mm-hmm.
on when the pandemic first kind of came about. Nobody went out and did anything. It was like a great trek to go to the grocery store to get your food for the week, and that was
Mm-hmm.
like the outing. And everybody's kind of gotten relaxed. They're going out having meals or going, and doing different social things. And I think we need to be responsible when we are doing these things and be careful. Um, you know, wear our mask. Don't go out if you don't need to. Um, don't put yourself in a situation where you're in a large crowd. Things like that. And that's, ultimately that's going to help, with the virus. And some other things that we can do is call and check in on our friends, our loved ones, um, see how they're doing, make sure they're doing okay. People that you work with, anything. It's like Chelsea said, Kristen can usually tell when she's in, a bad mood, and there's people that can do the same with me. Um, don't hide your emotions, let it out, do what you need to do. Um, because if you need help, you need help.
Yeah.
And, it is what it is. But check on your family, your loved ones, your coworkers. You never know. Obviously, everybody knows about COVID, but you don't know what everyone else is dealing with.
Yeah, you don't know exactly what they're going through. Check in on them and do those. Be use the precautions and they're there for a reason. And Jason, I'm going to you now. What do you think? Things that people can do to cope.
Just keep your head up. Pick up the phone, call someone if you're feeling down. Do a Zoom call. I think Zoom is free, right? You don't have to pay for it.
Yeah, the base version is free. Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's an easy way to be able to communicate with somebody and see somebody that you're talking to. The other thing is go to our website, get some information off of our website, make a phone call to the ministry. Um,
Mm-hmm.
we're here to help. We can put you in touch with some counselors that can provide counseling services if that's what you need. There's a lot of resources that we have to offer. Listen to our podcast. Um, we've done a couple of these now on COVID. There's some good information in there. So reach out to the ministry, and that's what I got.
Reach on out, Kristen. What about you? Anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I would just say check in on people regularly. And, I noticed a big thing for me was to get out of the house for a little bit, even if you can't go into a store or, go visit people, just get out in the car and go drive and put some music on, let the sunshine hit your face. And
Yeah.
that, when school started, and I don't think I had driven in weeks, and I was taking the kids to school, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so nice to be out in the sun and
Yeah.
hear cars and traffic. And so I think just getting out, call people, and even if you do have a friend that hasn't been around a lot of people, go sit and talk for a little bit, or just socialize any amount that you can. Read a book, just keep your mind busy, because I think sitting around, watching TV, watching all this news that's been going on this year, and
Yeah.
a lot of it can get overwhelming and depressing. And focus on your mental health, and a little self-care every now and then is nice. I know Chelsea and I love our our baths. We'll text each other and, hey, do you have a new bath playlist that we can listen to? Or,
Yeah,
you know,
little
so
something fun
just
like
kind of
that.
think outside the box and see what can be done to have some fun.
For sure. Chelsea, do you have any coping tips?
Yeah, for sure. So, I think first and foremost, I've talked a lot about the negative I've seen on the outside looking in, but I've seen a lot of good come from this year too. My dad lives by himself and is considered high risk, and so he's very cautious outside of work, where he's going, who he's around. And so one of the things that he's kind of done this year is developed a new hobby where he designs and creates his own custom fishing rods. And he's kind of turned his dining room and his apartment into his old workshop, and has made some really cool things and gotten to sell those. And so I think discovering new passions or rediscovering old ones that you kind of lost sight of, in the busyness of life. I know for me and my son, especially during the summer, we were, there was a summer league that was supposed to happen for baseball. It didn't happen. So, in the midst of that, we ended up, going to this park that's pretty spread out as far as kind of open fields, and you're not really around anyone. And so we would go and set up a tee, and we just do, hitting drills, catching drills, fielding drills, for hours, and I bring a little
Yeah.
speaker out there, and it was nice to be outside, but also safely. Him and I have gone fishing a lot, throughout this ordeal. And I'm grateful because I have a little boy that is all boy all the time. So he'd rather have a stick collection than toys or an iPad, and be outside. I'm blessed, and I take advantage of that, especially during all of this, is spending, time outside. In fact, he's actually this year taught Kristen and Jason's 5-year-old daughter, how to play baseball. So she'll go out there in her little tutu and glittery sneakers, and my son will sit there and help her, figure out the mechanics of hitting. And so it's just, it's about, a lot of it takes some self-will, because I know there's plenty of days where I don't want to get off the couch, and that's just kind of where I need to be for that day. But self-care is a huge thing, inside and outside of being a mom. So there's things that I can enjoy self-care wise with my son, but also there's things that I need to do to be a good mom, that takes care of just me, and I'm okay with that today. And then, so I think that fellowship, staying in contact with people, like Evan said, making sure that you're being exposed emotionally to the people that you trust and care about, and asking for help. We're in the middle of, one of the worst times in history that I've, been alive for. And I think that, you know, there's no shame in asking for help. And then
Absolutely.
lastly, there's a scripture that I've kind of come back to time and time again throughout the year, and just kind of remembering, in all the chaos and all the madness, and all of the uncertainty, I can stand in the truth, of knowing who's in control. And so it comes from the book of Philippians. It's Philippians 4:4 through 6, and it says, "Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. Let your reasonableness be known to everyone. The Lord is at hand. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God." And so I hold on to that, in the uncertainty, in the fear and the anxiety of the unknown, especially at the beginning of this year, really not knowing what was coming into fruition, but just knowing who's in control. At the end of the day, they've got the vaccine going, and starting that, and um, things are somewhat evening out as far as where they were at the beginning of the year. But the same God that's been in control this whole time is still in control today, and then every day after today. So I have to remind myself of that on a regular basis throughout the day, on a daily basis. But that has kind of been where my peace has come from this year, is knowing that truth.
Yeah, I can't think of a better way to end it myself. Ladies, gentlemen, thank you guys so much for joining me today on the podcast panel. It's a new year, right? 2021 is here, right? The vaccine starting to be distributed. The things we're on the up and up. I think there's one thing that, you know, I've learned over the course of me being alive is that the human race is resilient. There is nothing that we cannot do or we cannot accomplish as long as we do it together. So let's have that goal, doing it together 2021. Do what we got to do, get over this little hump in the road, and get back to somewhat normalcy. But guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Spiraling Podcast. Thank you, Evan, Jason, Kristen, Chelsea, for coming on. It's really been a good one. I know it's a little bit of a, down and dumps, but we brought it back there at the end. We brought back the energy. So be sure to find us where all podcasts can be heard: Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, the whole 9 yards. You guys know the deal. Subscribe to the YouTube, leave a like, leave a follow. It really does help us out. And we'll see you on the next one.